We good? One? Good evening, everybody. Good evening, our gallery who would be at home. We've actually got our executives sitting in our space where normally our citizens would be. And welcome, councillors. So tonight is a little unusual in our meeting, and if I could just start, I'm going to start with the statement of acknowledgement and stress a couple of issues. So item 2 is our statement of acknowledgement. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we are meeting and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and to those from other communities who are here with us today, for they hold the memories, the tradition and the culture of all Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people. Councillors, it is an unusual evening. We are all separated. You will notice that if you are sitting at home and watching us. We are required under the Local Government Act to continue to meet at this point in person. We are not allowed to do that online. So hence, your councillors who have been meeting via Zoom regularly are here tonight in our council chamber. Can I please just start with saying thank you to all of our community for taking care of each other. Councillors, thank you for the work that you continue to do, and thank you to the staff for the work under some, pretty interesting conditions. Councillors, tonight I'm actually going to hold us to time. The least time that we spend in here reduces our risk, and we are very aware of it despite lobbying state government about continuing to have to meet face to face. So councillors, if you do not have something that is absolutely burning to say, can you please hold your peace? That is to be get through this meeting as appropriately and quickly as we can so that we reduce our risk and our staff's risk of being here meeting tonight. Please, I will be respectful of the timing. I am going to time you, hence my phone is on the table. So I will be holding you to time. Often I let you have a bit of leeway. I'm going to pull you up tonight, and that is to ensure that we spend the least and the most appropriate but the least amount of time in here, just so you know. Item 3 on our agenda is apologies and requests for leave of absence. Is there any? Thank you. Item 4 is declarations under acts, regulations, codes or local laws. Does anybody have a conflict tonight? Item 5, no conflicts. Okay. Item 6 is confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting. They're at the bottom of page 3. Can I have, thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Did anybody wish to speak against those? No. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried unanimously. Item 7 is delegates' reports, of which there are nil. And that moves us swiftly into Section 8, which is the officers' reports for determination. And we have a 8.1 change to the instrument of delegation COVID-19 pandemic. And the recommendation is there on page 12, the recommendation from the officers. Do I have someone want to move that recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Bennett, did you wish to speak to it?
This is just in case we aren't able to meet again in person for whatever reason, so it's a short-term measure. It's also a measure that pretty much most other councils have already put in place.
Councillor Watson? No? Other councillors? Does anyone wish to speak against it? No? Can I ask a clarifying question? Sorry, and this is of the CEO, and this is really so it goes on to public record. I had a conversation with the CEO councillors and I asked around whether there should be a sunset clause and what that might look like. CEO, would you like to just go through the recommendation but also the thinking behind it?
Madam Mayor, thank you very much. I guess we have looked at best practice across all of the other councils across local government in Victoria, and as was mentioned by Councillor Bennett, there are some very strict limits to these enhanced delegations. They have to relate to this current period, which, as we've heard on the news, is a 1 in 100 year type of event. So the additional delegations would only come into play and will only come into play for the duration of this state of emergency as declared as the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's not ongoing. As soon as the pandemic state of emergency lapses, then so do these additional delegations. And the additional delegations, as was mentioned, will only come into play should our councillors not be able to achieve a quorum. It is likely, I think, that government may review the ability to continue with remote council meetings going forward. So I don't expect this delegation ever to be exercised, but as a cautionary piece of staff work, I think it's timely and relevant and consistent with most of councils in Victoria. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Councillor Bennett, nothing to close. Councillors, all those in favour? Against? Motion is carried. Item 8.2 is the acting CEO arrangements for COVID-19 pandemic. The recommendation is there on page 15. Do I have someone move that recommendation for me? Thanks, Councillor Hall. Seconder? Thanks. Draw. Thanks, Councillor Bennett. Anybody? Councillor Hall, did you wish to speak to it?
Okay, this is just a recommendation by Council to adopt a procedure for the replacement of the CEO should he be unable to act in his position due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Our deputy CEO would step up to the position should that be necessary, and to have a resolution in place as a precautionary arrangement lends for a smooth process in doing this. So it's just a procedure that helps, the council run. We know what's happening going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett? No? Any other councillors? Yes, Councillor Mildred.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Really, I've got a question more than anything to speak for or against, but the way this is drafted, what would happen if, say, for example, one of the directors was actually unwell and there was an acting director in that role? Does that automatically mean the acting director steps up if the CEO falls out? I think maybe there might be some, if that's not the case, then perhaps we should clarify.
Look, thank you. My understanding is that that is not the case, and we've had a cascading acting CEO that covers just the director positions and the incumbents of those positions. And in line with that, in terms of how we've been managing our self-isolation, we've been pretty careful to make sure that there's never all the directors in work at the moment, and we're rotating between those working in the office and those working from home. So we reduce the risk of all four directors and myself all falling ill and self-isolating at the same time. But my understanding is it has to be for the people in those roles. We can clarify that in the text if you feel it's necessary.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. CEO, I think we should clarify it in the resolution, perhaps, rather than by an external means, and that way it's locked in place. So perhaps we should add a point 5 that says something to the effect that these positions are to the incumbents in the position and not persons that might be acting in their roles.
Hang on. Yeah, so that is an amendment. Yep. Somebody happy to second that as the amendment? Yep. Is there any more discussion that's required around that? No? We'll vote on the amendment. So it's all points, so it's 1 to 5 now, not 1 to 4. So you're keeping the first 4 and adding 1 only. So councillors, if nobody wishes to speak against that, all those in favour? Thank you. Amendment is carried, and that was unanimous. Great. Sorry, thank you. So amendment now becomes the motion. Motion is now put. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 8.3, service agreement with the Victorian Electoral Commission. Again, recommendation page 18. Councillors, do I have someone move that? Thank you, Councillor Watson. Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Councillor Watson, any comments?
Madam Mayor, if this goes through, will be a good chance that there will be an election if the COVID-19 is lifted. So,
Any other comments, councillors? It is what it is. That's what they charge us, and it's in the budget. It'll just be wait and see what the date looks like. So, councillors, if no one needs to speak against that, we'll put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried unanimously. Item 8.4 is the March 2020 Quarterly Financial Report. So I'm just going to get us to the page. The recommendation to adopt or approve this is on page 37. Do I have someone move this report? Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Anybody else like to second that? Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Looking through this report, it becomes quite obvious that our finances are in quite good order, and based on what the country and the rest of the world is going through at the moment, it holds us in good stead to address potential repercussions that may happen to us over the next few months. So, very happy. Thank you.
Does any other councillor want to comment? Yep, Councillor Watson.
very quickly, Madam Mayor, I'd just like to pass on my thanks to all the staff because it's been a really hard quarter with the fires and everything through, and all our resources pretty well going through the motion. So Narelle and all her team, big congratulations on getting through.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Lowe.
Yep, I'd just like to comment and congratulate staff too, and probably eat a little bit of humble pie myself. I've often said that sometimes our cash reserves are probably too high, and thought that they could actually be a little bit lower and that those monies used elsewhere. But it's moments like these is the reason why you carry such good cash reserves. So congratulations to the staff.
Thank you, councillors. Nice comments. They have been working incredibly hard for us, the finance department, always this time of year, you do, particularly with budgets. And we know we've been working, Zooming to do those. But in addition to that, not only have we had a draft budget that was, getting ready to go out to public, but we've had to fundamentally look at that and actually do some significant changes. So in addition to producing quarterly reports that not only are relevant and useful for us councillors, but also to funding bodies and etc. and the figures we have to produce, they've been doing a significant amount of work as well with budgets. So Narelle, through you, please pass back to the team our genuine thanks. Councillors, I'm going to, Councillor Mitchell, you don't need anything to close. Councillors, put the motion, all those in favour. Thank you, motion is carried unanimously. Kevin, I'm looking for you to sitting up here whenever I say that and you're over there. Item 8.5, this will certainly get Councillor Bennett excited, is a single-use plastics policy. This is to receive the feedback that we had, and the recommendation is there on page 41. I knew you would like to move it, Councillor Bennett. Did somebody want to second it? Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Councillor Bennett.
I will try and make this really brief. To be clear on this, the scope is just council operations and events that we fund, like Fridays on My Mind. Both the federal government and the state government have goals around reducing and eliminating single-use plastics, so it's fantastic that we finally do. Indigo Council put their policy in a couple of years ago and theirs has been really successful. It's great for us to finally have this on the table to show and demonstrate our leadership in reducing single-use plastics with over time looking to eliminate them. And in the first iteration of this, the time frames we put in place were actually more further down the track, but because of community feedback, we've actually brought them forward because our community was so keen for us to take the lead here. Within the report, it does acknowledge that there can be costs involved with this as well as savings. Some examples I wanted to cite is last year, Council ran the Ride to Work Day event and made that single use free, and that event came out as cost neutral. So in different parts of council, we've already started to do this, and it's been cost neutral. I know there's local businesses that I go to that say, for example, Tun's Takeaway, Thai, her Thai place that she's just gone takeaway. Look her up on Facebook. So I bring my own container to her, and she actually charges me less because it costs her less because she doesn't have to purchase the additional containers. A point that I got clarified was quite early on, council consulted with our caterers to ensure that if we brought this policy in, it wouldn't disadvantage them, and they're completely fine to continue working with us, which is great because we don't want to be disadvantaging people. I think really bottom line is, you know, the federal government, the state government, our community support this, so let's just get it done.
Thank you. Councillor Mitchell, did you have something to say?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to say that council must lead by example, and that's the basis of this policy. So let's all make it happen. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Yep, Councillor Watson.
Madam Mayor, I'll be very, very quick on this one, but some of the things that we see in our community are balloons and helium balloons, and they fly up, and that's polluting our atmosphere and also polluting our waterways when the plastic comes down. So with COVID-19, I think there's so many new initiatives have started, and I think one of the initiatives we could do when we run events and things, instead of having balloons, we could have flags, buntings, and alike, which are replaceable, made out of cotton, and will be just as colourful and attractive. So I think, you know, the initiatives we can change just by having this policy in place.
Okay, I spoke to this policy back when it came to council for it to go out to the community for input. I'll be supporting the policy tonight, but I'm mindful that in substituting these types of plastics like we're bound to do, we will need to be forever mindful that the replacement could be more energy intensive and problematic than the original. So keeping that in mind, it will need diligence in this area. A move away from single-use plastics does take a leadership role going forward, and hopefully the council can achieve its aims in implementing this policy and encouraging our community to do the same wherever possible. Thank you.
Thanks. Yep, Councillor Mildred.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In essence, this is the single-use plastics. Changing away from the use of single-use plastics is a very positive thing, but in all economics, there's substitutes and there's costs and balances that break each way. In this particular case, there's very good and strong environmental reasons why we should be changing away from single-use plastics, even if the alternatives are marginally more expensive, but we should be alert and acutely aware of anything that's going to cost more than what it does now, and seek out alternatives that try and break even as much as we can at the very best. I suspect there's ways particularly with packaging, which is probably the biggest single-use plastic component. I think there's ways with packaging that we can just get rid of it and not have to replace it. So I think this is a great policy, and it's a step in the right direction. It's only one step in a fairly long program, I suspect. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to you, Councillor Bennett, anything to close?
Yeah, just one point quickly. Within the policy, it does acknowledge that there are people who need single-use plastics for medical reasons, so obviously this doesn't apply to them. So just wanted to make sure that was out there.
Thank you. Councillors, motion is before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried unanimously. Item 8.6 is the Wodonga Hills Strategy Project Update and Strategy Review. I've got an alternate motion, and there is a recommendation there on page 50 and an alternate motion. Who would like to put a motion on the table? Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. So you put the motion, we've got a copy of that. I'm taking it that would be available for people online? No? No? Radio, I'm going to see if we get a seconder, and then I'll get you to read it out, or did you want to make an amendment to this? No, I need somebody to second your motion if you want to put a motion on the table. No? Yep. Yep. No, you need to have a motion on the table unless you've got a question. Hang on.
The question is, I'm acutely aware of how COVID-19 is affecting this meeting tonight. I understand that potentially a lot of time may be involved in discussing this particular recommendation. I am prepared to withdraw my motion if council decides to defer this particular recommendation to a meeting in the next month or two. That will also give council time to discuss at length what brought about a number of issues within this motion, and we may be able to come to an amicable solution on it.
So, there is a recommendation there. Do I have somebody who wants to put a motion tonight? Yes, Councillor Mildred. Sorry, hang on.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move we defer this matter to a future council meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Mitchell, I'm assuming you want to second that? Okay, did you want to speak to that, Councillor Mildred? You want to speak to that? No? Okay, councillors, let's put that motion. Is there an alternate motion foreshadowed in case this one doesn't get up? No? Rightio, councillors, all those in favour? Sorry, all those in favour of deferring the report? Against? Yeah, it is. Against? Motion is lost. I'm going to actually look to Kevin. Hang on just 1 second. Okay, did somebody else want to put a motion? Yep, Councillor Mildred. Oh, but Councillor Mitchell. Looking at the wrong person.
I would like to move a motion that is the project update set out in this report be received and noted. 2, the Wodonga Hill strategy be reviewed during the period May 2020 to November 2020 by a new committee that will operate under a revised terms of reference as defined by council and will consist of councillors along with nominated representatives from DELP or DELWP, the Indigenous Community, Country Fire Authority and the Wodonga Urban Land Care Network. The council recognises that the Wodonga Hills Advisory Group have discharged their duties of acting as an advisory group to council and now ceased to meet, and that council acknowledges the Wodonga Hills Advisory Group's contribution to the Wodonga Hills strategy implementation.
Thank you. Is there a seconder there? Yep, Councillor Lowe, were you seconding or? Yes. Do we need a seconder first? Yep, I need a seconder first. Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Are you happy to, councillors, we need a vote to suspend standing orders for open discussion. This might actually cover off some of what you were talking about before. I need to take a vote on that, Kevin. Yep. So, councillors, are you all happy to suspend standing orders? All those in favour? Against? One decline. Is that okay, Kevin? Majority? Yep. Okay, suspended standing orders. Councillors, please feel free, but you'll need to just give me a signal to say you want to speak. Yep. Sorry, let me turn that off.
So I just got a couple of questions on the motion. So the original recommendation is about an update and a strategy review that we've just undertaken with skills-based advisory. And one of these questions is to the CEO. Was there a DELP representative on this last CEO? Or Leon might be better? No? Was there an Indigenous community member? No? Yep, yep. And there was an apology from the CFA as well? That's correct. Yep. And Yeah.
So they were invited, but they didn't attend. So they already have been invited. Right.
And the Wodonga Urban Land Care Network went on there. Have you asked any of these members if they wanted to be on this thing? Because I don't think we can just make the assumption that, I'm sure they would be, but are we able to actually put that in the motion? Because I thought we would have need to have spoken to the Wodonga Urban Land Care Network before we. In the thing, so I'm just seeking clarity around that. Yeah.
Because maybe I have this wrong. They already have been invited, and they've declined or said whatever they've said.
The reason why I'm asking these questions, I don't want to involve groups if they don't want to be involved, because what's the point of that? I think one of your main points of was the no-shows on some of these on the past group, not getting quorums. Are we going to go into the same space that we did then, or are we going to come out with the same problem? And how do we assess these? Because we went off a skills-based group already. So I'm not sure what we're achieving by changing the name.
I'll deal with that when I speak to the motion.
Can I ask, so I know that the CEO wanted to also present something around this report, and while we're in open, we remove standing orders. Councillors, are you happy to hear from the CEO around some facts and things that may actually preempt answers to some of your questions? And then absolutely you can speak to it. You don't want the CEO to speak to it? No? Okay. Righto. Councillors? Oh, sorry.
Madam Mayor, the CEO, Mark Dixon, emailed or wrote to us all at 3:07 today, and that clearly indicates what I believe is the right direction. And I'd like to hear from Mark so the community can hear it.
Other councillors, anyone opposed to the CEO speaking? Did anybody else have other questions that they thought were more relevant and needed to put out first? You do, Councillor Mildren?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm in two minds about the CEO speaking. If the CEO is going to enter the debate and participate in the debate, then I'm opposed and suggest that that's not appropriate. If the CEO is about to give us some facts and figures that are not designed or intended to influence the debate, then terrific. We should get that information and it should be part of our decision making.
Well, look, trying not to influence the debate in any way whatsoever, I guess from a council officer perspective, I'd just like to make the comment that there's been a huge amount of work done on the Hills strategy, and I think it all commenced back in July 2016. And since July 2016, we've invested a significant amount of time and money and resources of both council and also actually of those people who were asked to participate in the Wodonga Hills Advisory Group. And I think at some point, noting that the strategy, after all of that work, is actually relatively new. And we only actually signed off on the agreed priorities, which the Hills Advisory Group were asked to review back in August 2019, last year. So we've done a huge amount of work with our community on this strategy. but we've done no implementation of the strategy whatsoever. And, you know, from a council officer perspective, I think I just draw your attention to the items on page 46 of the report, where the advisory group explain their reason for what might be seen as a very short review. But that clearly says that the strategy in its current form is still very relevant, bearing in mind that the action plan and recommended priorities were only formally adopted by Council in June 2019, and the current implementation of the plan is still in its early stages, and more time needs to elapse before a valid review of the strategy can be undertaken. So I guess from a council officer perspective, I would just sort of endorse those comments. And I'd also say, in terms of any new motion, I would just ask councillors to be mindful of additional cost and how we find that in a very tight OPEX budget if we are to do more work with regards to finalising or reviewing a strategy that, in my view, is fairly new. Thank you.
I'm just, Councillor, I'm going to go to Councillor Mitchell, even though we're open standing orders, so it's not speaking directly to your motion, but did you want to speak, Councillor Mitchell? Just remembering that it's open standing orders, so it's for questions and etc. Councillor Hall, you need your microphone on, and I've just thrown to Councillor Mitchell. Is it to actually bring up something that would be relevant or pertinent to him speaking first or not? No? I can come to you next, that's okay. Yep.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Are you asking me to respond to the CEO's talk or to speak to my motion?
So, at the moment we're in open standing orders, so it's not, you can speak to your motion, but you'll also get another opportunity to. Open standing orders allows us to have clarity, have open discussion, open flowing discussion, so that you're not just limited to your time frame, and it allows you to raise questions of others, and if they put other points, what that might look like. So just as courtesy, I'm giving you the floor to, if there's any other parts of questions, clarity that you want to seek, etc., but you'll absolutely get ample time to speak to your motion. Yep, sure. Councillor Hall.
Yes, just want to make a point about what our CEO said about we're still relatively new haven't gone too far with the strategy from councillors yet, but it says here that we've spent approximately $550,000, so that's quite a substantial sum of money, and I would beg to differ on that one.
So I didn't say that we'd not spent a lot of money, and in fact, since July 2016 in developing this strategy, we've spent a significant amount of money in consultation. We've run numerous public consultations and engagement with the community, and run polls, and had a whole range of opportunities, and that does cost money. And in terms of actually implementing the actions from the strategy, Council is currently just commencing that now with regards to those projects that were on the agreed list of priorities. But we actually haven't implemented those yet. So I guess the advisory group's view was that it was too early, and perhaps we should implement some of the actions that have been agreed through the strategy and then review it once we've completed those actions. Thank you.
Just some clarifiers for Councillor Mitchell. So with the time frame, the May 2020 to November 2020, and with inviting people that have already been invited, so what do you hope to achieve inviting people who have already been invited, and that particular time frame, knowing that councillors will go into caretaker mode, nearly halfway through that? And I just want to work out that time frame. Can you just help me understand why you chose that time frame and inviting people who are already invited?
Does your
I'll answer that question. If you look at the original recommendation, the recommendation is, the recommendation from the Wodonga Hills Advisory Group was that they were to be reviewing the strategy in May to November 2020. So I've continued on that vein. In discussions after I speak to my motion, will not be adverse to looking at the possibility of moving it 12 months. But at the present time, I will leave it at 2020.
Yeah, sorry. I was just kind of picking up on Kat's point. What are you trying to achieve by another review of the strategy? Is there something in the strategy that you don't think should be there, or the overall strategy is wrong? Or I'm just not sure why we're having a review on a review, that's all.
We're not having a review of a review. We're changing the review we should have had in this in the March through to November 2020 by the Wodonga Hills Advisory Group. They were to review and advise council. What I'm saying here is that we form a different committee and that we do that review. That is the same review they were going to do.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Part of the reason why I think we need the review, or why the review was originally put in place the way it was because even as we went through this process of putting this together, and there's always been niggling concerns and different things that have popped its head up that we've kept pushing into the future and to have reviewed. And even in this report that's come back today, this officer report, there's things that pop up that suggest to me that we really do need a review, because to throw a couple of examples, and I know throwing examples out draws, other things that get focused on the example, but we've had things like the Cultural Heritage Management Plan reviewed, which there is no budget allocation for that as part of a process. It was done without coming back to council for any consideration or decision about it. And a Cultural Heritage Management Plan is a very significant document. It's a very significant piece of work, and it has significant legislative place. And to just willy-nilly decide to have a collaborative view of, let's review it and let's change it because perhaps it doesn't fit what we want as an outcome, is just not right. It should have come back to council and it didn't. The other thing that concerns me a little is we have things like because this is such a complex issue, there's a whole myriad of different implementation processes and different bodies that have controls and influences over what goes on. And one of which, for example, was a DELP committee. And we have a situation where, admitted in this report, is we've had an appointment of somebody representing council on that committee. I don't recall that appointment being made by the council. I'm certainly aware that the delegations of the CEO explicitly say that the delegation does not give approval for appointing people to external committees. So by definition, that should have come back to the council as well. So there's a whole range of different things of that nature. Individually, they might not be major issues, but collectively, they're suggesting that perhaps we really should be reviewing what's transpired and look to another way of progressing into the future. And to go to the CEO's point, the CEO says we've spent a lot of money and we've done a lot of things. Hypothetically, if that resulted in the incorrect or an inappropriate outcome, then we should be detecting and picking that up now before we spend more money on implementing it. I'm not saying it is the wrong outcome. I'm just saying the review is intended to pick these things up, and that's what we should be doing. And really, for the committee the WAG group to wander off and say, no, they're not going to do it because it's too new and too young, defeats the purpose of why it was put in their charter. It was in their terms of reference as a committee for them to actually do this. So, you know, it's not a simple thing to walk away from. I just think there's very good reason why we should be reviewing this process. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Can I just seek a bit of clarity? Because you made a point, and I'm not sure was certainly not my understanding, is we actually didn't have a council representative on it. We actually had somebody taking notes and organising the meetings and etc. But I don't ever remember there certainly wasn't a councillor, and we did that very deliberately. But there wasn't a council staff member there being a representative. Thank you, Leon. So the answer, in case that didn't come across at all, was that there was an ex officio role performed by previous CEO and then our Director of Planning to really provide the coordination. So I just wanted to get some clarity because that was not my understanding of there was somebody on there. Yep. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just raised the point in the agenda item. That's where I raised the question from. There's no other knowledge or anything, but the agenda item just says council is represented on the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning McFarlane's Hill Reference Group. I mean, that's where I got it from. But yeah.
Okay, thank you. So the clarity was sought around the McFarlane's Hill. It's actually the DELP committee, and there is a council staff member on that, and that was around Crown land that council does not own and is actually controlled by DELP. Yep, correct. Last question, I'm going to close standing orders, councillors, because I said to be fast. Yep, go for it. Last one.
The point I make seems to have been proven then, because we're represented on an external committee without a resolution of council to put that representative on there.
Thank you. Councillors, I'm going to ask to resume standing orders. All those in favour? Thank you. Okay, back to you, Councillor Mitchell, who put the motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and councillors. The committee, being the Wodonga Hills Advisory Group, has been contentious and to a large degree non-functional due to their inability to maintain a quorum at any more than 2 of their past meetings. Until this last meeting where they met the new reduced quorum number of 4 by 4 only of the potential 9 attending. Rarely did the majority stakeholders attend. In fact, the Country Fire Authority never attended, as Mayor Speedy contended by expressing her anger in the Border Mail last year. I am now proposing that a new committee be formed to review the Wodonga Hills strategy. This would be made up of councillors and key stakeholders whose attendance would be assured through reminders and follow-up for each of the proposed 3 meetings. Let me be very clear on what I'm proposing here. I'm not saying that we reinvent the wheel. I would like to see a common sense review of the process with the addition of outcomes that emerge from the 2C, 1C Regional Environment Strategy that was recently released. 3 meetings with a structured agenda would suffice at a minimal cost or time expenditure. This will ensure that we are delivering balanced results for our residents and ratepayers of Wodonga. As an aside, I would entertain, under the circumstances that we're experiencing at the moment, extending the date out to March 2021 to November 2021, should there be sufficient support for such a change. And I'm only suggesting that now after our discussions tonight. Thank you.
Can I just? Can we make the amendment now before we vote on the motion? Would you like to put the amendment now for yeah? So for those dates, yeah.
So councillor, so your motion is slightly changed? Okay, so from March 2021 to November 2021. Councillor Bennett, are you happy to still second that? Thank you. Do you need to talk any further to that, given we've just added that change? No? No? Sorry, have you not got a further question, Councillor Lowe? Or I'm going to go to Councillor Bennett for her. She's the seconder. She gets next go. Another question? Hang on.
Just because there's no terms of reference, just that will be one monthly meeting over that course.
I'm saying that we have 3 meetings over over that time period, which is what, 7-8 months. That can be a 2-3 hour meeting 3 times over that period.
A couple of points that I'm looking for here when I'm looking at this. Number one is that how long again that our CEO pointed out that this has been going on since 2016, and that where we are now has had so much community input. In terms of, like, I've been involved with council for 15 years and I've never seen a consultation process like this. So, certainly, I mean, obviously everyone goes, is in different circles, but what I'm hearing is people saying, gosh, how long has this been going on for? Can't we, get on with something? I'm more happy with that date, that particular date change, but I don't see why these organisations who have already been invited to be on this group, what's going to change, and this is probably a question actually, what do you think is going to change if they've already been invited and declined the invitation? What's going to change, you think, to actually get them to physically come to these meetings?
Last year, when there was an important Wodonga Hills Advisory Group meeting, I expected very few people to turn up, so I actually got on the phone and I rang people who had not been in attendance at WHAG meetings on a number of occasions, and I got them to turn up. So again, the committee has been recalcitrant in attempting to even phone their committee members and get them along to the meeting. So it stems from the top. They weren't able to pick up a phone and make a telephone call to get their people there. It's not that difficult.
Another point that I wanted to pick up was around the comment about the draft natural environment strategy that we're doing with Albury, and that there might be clashes with that. Can you give us some examples of where those clashes with that draft document are?
I can't say there's going to be clashes or not at this point in time, because I'm, again, still not fully conversant with the 2C, 1C regional strategy that is to come out. I am very busy reading through it and coming up with various points, but I'm not prepared to commit to what is a conflict and what's not tonight. I'm sorry, because again, I'm not fully read on that new strategy.
No, just a comment in terms of the officer that was involved in both of these documents has said that that from what she can gather, that there isn't any conflict.
I read a note from Claire this afternoon who did state that there could be quite a number of conflicts, but she wasn't prepared to tell us what they might have been. But I'm sorry, I read that in some documentation this afternoon.
I'm reading the email that we've all got sent today at 12:47 p.m. with comments from Claire. So you're saying that later, yep, additional context. We've all got this email. Council's natural resource planner, who project managed both the Wodonga Hills strategy and the RNES, has advised that the RNES is a high-level strategy. It is designed specifically to provide overarching direction to any decision-making that may influence the regional environments as a whole. Given the large study area and inherently broad approach of a strategy, it is unlikely that there will be a direct conflict with any other existing plans. However, it's certainly intended to guide how other plans, projects and even day-to-day operations are planned and implemented. And as an example, it may influence operational priorities, funding, applications, or what factors are given consideration in project planning or design across the two cities.
So that doesn't negate anything, in my opinion. She's basically saying that the 2C1C strategy is an overlay over the Wodonga Hills strategy, and she hasn't said that it's going to be either way.
Okay, councillors, I will open the floor for other comments from other councillors. Is anybody wish to speak? For or against? Councillor Hall, you wish to?
Question regarding that email. I didn't get that email. 12:47. For or against the motion? No, I will support the motion.
Madam Mayor, I will speak against the motion in the sense that it appears a lot of the issues are coming from the West Wodonga, and remember, this strategy is all a Wodonga Hills strategy. It's Huon Hill, it's all our surrounding hills in our network. And I don't believe our community has seen some of the projects come to site without before a review, and having March 2023 and up to November 2023 to do the review of the strategy, is giving a chance to see some developments being done. And remember, those developments all have to come through council to be processed and passed, both in a budgetary way and a construction way. So unfortunately, I do speak against the motion. I think what was presented to us tonight is the right motion to carry forward.
Okay, before I go back to you, Councillor Mitchell, for close, I've got a couple of clarifiers that I'm simply just not sure of. But first of all, I wanted to acknowledge that the groups that you're suggesting, and I'm seeking some clarity, but throughout the creation of the draft document, so the actual document that ended up being adopted, the actual Community Hills strategy, those groups were actually involved in the forming and the information, the collection of knowledge and the collection of information. I'm looking down at the end at the directors, given that they were actually around at the time. Leon, not to put you on the spot, but can you answer that question? Mm. Mm. Okay, thank you. It's just that I'm trying to remember, and it is, you're right, it's actually a long time ago now, so I needed to really go back through diary stuff. But it was my understanding that through the draft component, things like the fire plan, etc., was spoken with in terms of integration into the Hills plans, and that certainly had CFA input and emergency services and etc. So I was just in my understanding that these groups, in a fashion through the stakeholder engagement when we actually employed a consultant, actually had some input, but I'm happy to stand corrected. I think the other component that I'd really like to understand is in terms of getting the product reviewed, what is it specifically you're thinking they're going to review? Is it simply process? Is it actually the implementation of the actions or one or two of the first priorities? What's actually going to be reviewed in 2021 in your mind? Sorry, I'm just trying to understand it.
Madam Mayor, the existing Wodonga Hills Advisory Group were to review the strategy themselves over the next few months between March and November. All I'm suggesting is that and they have basically advised that they will cease to meet, to be a committee that is formed from councillors and stakeholders such as DELC and the CFA, etc., to review what they would have reviewed. I'm not talking about anything dynamically different. It's only what they were going to do. In response to Councillor Watson, Councillor Watson, this is not to do with one specific area. It's a general overview of the policy. Nothing to do with certain hills or certain areas, etc. And there is no malice in what I'm putting here and nothing underhanded. So, I feel that your observations in that area are incorrect.
I've just tried to do a quick Google here in relation to your question about who was involved, and we've referenced that in our August and our October meeting of 2017, we talk about the letter that we've all received from the CFA that supports the strategy, but I haven't had time to Google all the other people yet.
Very familiar with the CFA one because it was so key. Yeah, so I've got questions still. Councillors, are you happy if I continue to ask them? I'm not making commentary. I'm actually trying to seek some clarity around a motion. I'm happy to. No, I'm just asking questions. I'm not actually putting any commentary yet. I'm asking questions to get clarity around the motion that's sitting on the table. I'm happy to open standing orders if you want to knock yourselves out, but I'm going to continue with questions unless anybody's got another question that wants to bump in front of me. So I'm just, because I seriously am just trying to understand. So in terms of reviewing, currently we have items sitting in the budget that allows for the implementation of the action plan. I am assuming that it continues, but a review will be taking place in the future. That's my understanding. Because if we wait for a review, the document is both live, or my understanding would be that it will continue, and then in 2020, etc. So I'm just trying to seek some clarity because I want to make sure I've got it right in my head so I understand your motion of which way to vote. CEO, can you answer that or give me any other clarity, please?
And if you go back to the original motion that talked about, in fact, if you go back to the skills-based Wodonga Hills Advisory Group, it's a similar theme that they said we need to allow more time before conducting that review. They've suggested the 2023 as the time period, the revised.
Voting on and how I'm going to vote because I hadn't made up my mind. So councillors, if you would actually allow me to speak as a councillor about every single hill and actually put their considerable skills to good use. We actually had an international environmental scientist on there. We actually had some pretty significant talent. In terms of not even phone calling those people, actually they were contacted multiple times, not only just via email, but they were actually rung and asked to attend at the highest. So, Councillor Mitchell, I was tonight and I actually didn't understand what you were saying. I think I do now. And I think that it actually keeps the integrity of what the original motions absolutely sits underneath it. But very clearly the priority natural environment. It talks about engage and support people to meet, participate, amphitheatre, and improves health and wellbeing and access to landscape and resources and teens. So I actually see that that document that will go out to draft to community for comment pretty soon on the basis that, you know, it doesn't throw out all the great work that's been done and the thousands and thousands of hours of community work, community input into a document and has gone through multiple levels of community and specialists and etc. I'm absolutely happy to keep reviewing it, but I think it would be foolhardy to throw out a document that's had that much attention and also, I guess, sets of eyes over it. So I will support your motion tonight now that I actually understand it.
I thank you for your comments and obviously I agree with them. So I move the motion be put.
Thank you. Councillors, all those in favour? Against? Motion is carried. Thank you, councillors, for the discussion. Thank you for your respectful consideration. It is an incredibly important document and an important strategy as notioned by the number of people involved. Item 9.1 is the Audit Committee's biannual report. The recommendation is there on page 51. Councillor Mitchell, you're our representative on that. Did you want to move that? Yeah? And somebody want to second that for us? Yep, thanks, Councillor Watson. Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A little while ago, when we were looking at the quarterly budget, I said that our accounts and our budget and our department was in very good order. I reiterate that it is in good order, and I thank the finance department for doing great work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watson.
Madam Mayor, I'd just like to recognise the people that are on that audit committee because there's a great range of great quality people that bring good work to our city.
Thank you, councillors. Is there any other comments? Does anyone wish to speak against it? Otherwise, I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried unanimously. I think this is the most that I've actually spoken out loud in a long time and I'm getting a scratchy voice. Item 10.1 is the planning report for March. It's for information only. Was there any comment or questions? Nope. 10.2 building report for March. It is again for information only. Was there any comment or questions? Councillor Watson?
I just like on the bottom of page 55, Madam Mayor, the structure of a shade structure with solar panels, just showing that the change we're doing in our city and what people are doing to help our environment.
Thank you. As a little upside to that, that's actually at the Wodonga Community College. They were actually furiously working there last week, and so they will be going up over their car park. Item 10.3 is the Competitive Services Report for March 2020. Again, information only, any comment? Again, worthy of note when we see that spend stay local. 10.4, Assemblies of Councillors. You'll notice that many of the venues are the remote online meeting rooms. 10.5 is the Decisions Register. Again, for information only. No questions, comments. There wasn't anything that had been accidentally missed. Nope. And 10.6 is the Council Plan Progress Report. You had it in your attachments, councillors. Was there any questions or comments? No. Good to see, given that we are actually fast approaching the end of this council term. It always seems to go so quick. And seeing that most of those items in there are well underway, if not nearly complete on everything. So, CEO, through you, back to your team, well done. Item 11, there is no notices of motion. Item 12, no petitions. Council seals, general business. No urgent business, there is none. Question time, there is one question. Thank you, CEO.
Madam Mayor, thank you. We did receive one submission, obviously in writing due to the circumstances. So the question to our meeting this evening was from Michelle Cowan, and the question was in relation to item 8.6, the Wodonga Hill strategy. We will provide Michelle with a full written response, but very briefly, bearing in mind the time, the question was in two parts. The first part was whether Wodonga Council will make the assessment that was done by consultants around the proposed climb track route. Will we make that report fully and publicly available immediately? And the answer is that we will certainly make that report publicly available once and if the councillors have considered it first. So it's just being finalised, and certainly it would be our intent to make it publicly available. The second question was in relation to why or whether Wodonga Council can explain why it considered that a planning permit was not required or is not required in order to undertake leisure and recreation works in an area within a bushfire management overlay. And we provided quite a detailed response to Michelle in relation to that. But in summary, and to be brief, the provisions of clause 62.02-1 of the Wodonga Planning Scheme provides permit exemptions for buildings and works which are undertaken on or behalf of council where the cost of that development is under $1 million. So in this case, the exemption applies, and the amount of works, particularly on that track, relate to, I think, about $85,000. So well below the amount that we can exempt the planning permit for. So that written response will go back to Michelle. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. It leaves me to actually close the public part of tonight's meeting. We have one item in which to discuss in confidential, and then, strangely enough, we come back, open it to close the meeting again. So if you'd like to stay tuned, we will be back. Other than that, councillors, I need someone to move the motion to close this. Thank you, councillor. Thank you. All those in favour to open the meeting, thank you. Councillor Mildred, Councillor Hall? Yep. Yep. Thank you. Councillors, we've returned to open council meeting and there needs to be an adoption of the in-camera recommendations. Can I have someone move that? Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Thank you, Councillor Bennett. All those in favour? Councillor Mildred? You're happy to accept those. Thank you. Motion is carried unanimously. So, oh, sorry, you said against. Sorry, I didn't hear that. Against. Okay, so there was one vote of against. Councillors, I'd just like to, before I officially close the meeting again, thank our staff for being flexible. They are working incredibly hard. We're seeing different ways of still trying to provide service to our community. Also like to personally thank the CEO. I know through him and with his team, we have been looking at every opportunity of how we reduce costs but continue service. How do we reduce the impact on our community? So there is no easy solution. There is nobody out there with all the answers. The best that we can do is the best that we can do. So again, also thank you to councillors for making yourselves available sometimes quite late into the evening on Zoom. That can be a bit of a challenge when we have, particularly me, has bad connection. And I thank you for your work and your diligence that you continue to do in relation to the delivery of our budget and certainly taking care of our community. So councillors, that just leaves me to close the meeting and let's hope that on May 18th we will be able to warmly welcome our public back in here. Thank you for your discussion tonight. Thank you, CEO, and thank you, team, for providing a gallery.